Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is November 12th, 2024. You're listening, watching the Daily AI Show live. And today we're talking about the entry level job paradox, meaning like what happens for our future college graduates that are coming out, not necessarily tomorrow or May, but in the near future. And as we see this rise of what agentic workflows agents can do, how they can handle multiple tasks. We're seeing a little bit of this from what Claude has put out, or Anthropic has put out with Claude on the desktop, and we've seen this before with Hyperwrite and everything else. So we know that's coming, and it's able to handle more and more and more. Let's call them entry level type tasks. And so the conversation today is about, okay, what happens to college graduates coming out into the workforce who in the very near future may not even have those entry level jobs, and not that they were great paying, they were entry level, but what happens when they go away, or if they go away? And of course, this conversation is going to be very dependent on the industry and sub industry. It's not across the board. It's not across the country. Every city, every state's going to be slightly different around the world as well. But to have this conversation today, we have Jyunmi, Beth, Andy, and I'm Brian. And this is something that I brought up to you guys on Slack as sort of a starting point. I said, hey, I have this thought in my head and I just want to sort of roll it around. And it eventually made it into a show topic. But it's really where my brain was. And I looked this up. I used Perplexity to try to get some numbers here to get started. And although, again, it varies fairly drastically. So it's not like we can say $45,000 is the median number. There is some median number for college graduates, but because of geography and because of industry, of course, that is going to adjust. If you're entry level coming out in law or engineering or computer science, it's going to tip closer to like 65,000. You probably also have higher student debt too, but it's about 65,000. If you're coming out just general degree, like a bachelor of science, bachelor of arts, it appears to be closer to 50, 45 to 50 with some variance in there, depending on whether this is remote or I live in San Fran, I live in DC, or I live in Tampa. Right. So that's sort of the numbers we have. I wish I had something better than that, but it does factor on where you are and all those things. But that's sort of a starting point. Another thing that I found interesting are that only 55% of graduates are employed within 6 months of graduation. That's kind of shocking, right? To think that you have lots of graduates coming out who aren't even going in. We already know, I didn't even look up the stat, but we already know there's tons of people who come out like me, who came out with a degree and never, ever, ever used it. I graduated with my original degree was in geography. I never worked in geography. My master's degree is technically master's in executive leadership in fire service. Now I leave off the fire service, right? Because that's irrelevant to what I do, but I was a firefighter for several years. And so that's when I got my master's degree, it was specifically for fire service. It was setting me up to be a future chief in my fire department or somewhere, right? That's where I thought my projected path was at the time. So anyway, all that to say, I don't want to keep talking here, but all that to say, here's some numbers to throw out there. Maybe you guys have done some research as well, but what happens in 5 years when you have a senior today in high school who's going to, we'll just say 4 years, that's another variable. We'll just say they graduate in 4 years from a state school, university, whatever it is, not the highest, not the lowest, just kind of in the middle there. What happens to that student in 5 years when they technically hit the workforce from senior today to then, knowing what we know or what we believe we know about AI, what would happen in the next 5 years? What do they do today to plan for not having so many entry level jobs 5 years from now? That's where my brain is, at least. So I'm curious to hear what you guys think.
So I think
So,
one of the
go ahead.
things that has been said over about the last year, certainly it started to gain traction as the coding assistants started to come about, and the ability for like Claude and now ChatGPT to do more like consultative planning kind of help. is you're hearing software engineers, like senior software engineers, people who know kind of what that is like to create a business based on that, say there's never a better time for someone to be an entrepreneur in this context.
Mm.
Your like your advice for entrepreneurs is plentiful and the models are trained on that. The skills that you would traditionally need to become an expert in that are you're able to like get around them by using AI, or you're able to hire somebody who's now making a little less for that, for a specific kind of the project, right? A leg of the project. Um, Now that doesn't get at everybody. There's a small minority of people who are gonna be comfortable doing that.
Right.
But that is what I have heard in this level of conversation. That, yep, that's a tricky part, and things are changing, and if you've ever wanted to be an entrepreneur or thought about it, this is an excellent time to lean into that vision.
So my
Yeah. So
follow-up to
what
that,
that
Beth, or to
sounds like
anybody.
to me is, everybody's going to have to create their own job because entry level jobs aren't going to be available. And that trend is not a 5-year, it's going to happen over 5 years, but it's already happening for the class of 2024. So while coming out of the pandemic, there was a persistent labor shortage. And last year, 2023, 15% more college graduates, got jobs than in 2022. Now the forecast for the class of 2024 is 6% fewer than last year. And why? Because companies are already eliminating entry-level positions, anticipating or already experiencing the advantages of using AI for a number of what have historically been entry-level positions. I want to talk in just a moment about what the long downstream effects of loss of entry-level positions are. But I just wanted to provide a little personal anecdote, which is at Life Aid Beverage Company, where I was the CEO. No, I take that back. I was not the CEO. Whoops. Sorry, Orion. I was the chief operating officer. Sorry. We hired largely as the entry-level position into our customer support department, assisting all the people who buy online the product and so on. And this is a great place to learn everything about the products and the company and to be an authority on what the customers are saying. And this gives them interaction with every level of the company, every department. And there was a very significant progression from being a customer service agent. If you stayed with that for just even a year or 2 years and demonstrated really great skill, people went on to, I can think of one example where a really talented woman went on to become a major sales executive at the company, and then at other companies. Like, her entry-level position was customer support. Which department is likely to be eliminated by AI? Customer service. That's the
Followed by
number one
sales.
place. What?
Followed by sales.
Yeah, well, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, or augmented drastically by AI. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens? So this is really interesting. There's a number of things that I wouldn't have thought about that are impacted by this. So there's structural changes to our workforce. So, you've got fewer opportunities for hands-on learning and skill development, reduced mentorship from experienced workers. Instead of working with other workers, you're going to be working to supervise AI output. That's the entry-level position. And obviously, there's going to be fewer of those positions. And you're not going to be able to build a professional network early in your career because you're talking to AIs. That's what the lowest level entry positions are. This leads to lower long-term earnings, higher rates of social problems. So it's a really significant issue, and it's a generational issue because there's reduced knowledge transfer from one generation to the next when you no longer have a new flock of the new generation coming in and working side by side with the people who have been experienced in that industry or whatever. So it's really a systemic and structural problem to lose the entry-level positions.
And combated with that, Andy, is remote work versus on-site work. And one of the pushbacks you hear quite a bit for remote work, not everybody. So like I've worked for a remote company now for almost 4 years and it works fine. However, I did work with a CEO. He was my client, large company. And he made the point that he wanted a hybrid situation, and he was explaining to me why, but he said it was so valuable to him. He was a bit of a teacher, an educator, right? As a CEO, I really loved seeing the young new energy come into the building and stuff. But his point to it was, how can they overhear me in a hallway having a conversation? How can they hear me at the water cooler, or where you used to have these not planned, not Zoom, are you scheduled, can you do it type things, just these impromptu conversations that were happening. Even if you weren't part of the conversation, he said he made it a point as part of what he did to have, whenever capable, conversations in the open. He would purposely have conversations in a hallway with somebody, as long as it wasn't, people could hear it, because his point was, I want the newer generation to overhear how these three people in this triangle here are thinking about talking to each other respectfully, maybe disagreeing, and ultimately coming up with a solution. And he said, how are you going to do that in a remote workplace I'm not saying it's impossible, but his point was, how do you do that without really setting up a system where there's like open invites to like open Zoom rooms? I mean, there's a way to do it, right? There's a way to do a virtual workshop type area where that's communicated. It's just much harder. It's much harder to do it. So anyway, I just wanted to bring it up as another wrinkle here, is that not at the same time that we are getting these new AI advancements that are impacting job entry, or entry level jobs is what I was trying to say. You also have the bigger push towards remote and away from in-person interactions. And that kind of just layers it on top of it, where you go, hey, great if you are going to college and maybe getting those 4 years of interactivity, but more than likely the people that you're interacting aren't the people that are going to hire you, and may not be talking and speaking to you the way the people who would hire you might be. So if those entry levels go away, there needs to be a refocus, and this is my opinion, there needs to be a refocus on not necessarily internship, but making sure that through college, maybe even starting in high school, I would say, that the students are getting this exposure. I would say this is the time. If you're a high school senior or junior going into early college, here's the rub. You got to go to school. You probably have to have a job to help pay the bills and help your folks or whatever. Maybe you're self-sufficient. You also need to go and stand in places that may not pay you money, just so you can get the experience and people go, hey, I like you. You're all right. You're a hard worker. I love this. Hey, why don't you talk to me in a year? I don't have anything for you right now, but I will. Hey, keep doing your studies. Keep doing what you're doing. There needs to be more of that, more community building on that way. I simply don't know how the students are going to get this in a remote, isolated work where jobs are disappearing in front of them. They can't come out the door and just say, you know what, I'll figure it out, but I can lay low in my parents' basement and make $45K a year. Maybe, but where's that going to take you? How are you going to get from to the next spot? Anyway.
Yeah, contrast this with the history of lifetime employment in Japan. So historically in Japan, you would join one of the major companies. You go in at an entry-level position, like very low-level responsibilities. But the expectation is, the contract between the employer and the employee was that you're here for life, and we're going to develop you over the time to take increasingly more responsible and better paid positions. That's been eroding in Japan as well. And the disruptions that are happening in the workplace now as a result of AI are basically reducing even the prospect of successful progression, even if you manage to land one of those things. Because now remember, as AI progresses over the next 5 years, you're going to see some positions in the knowledge work that requires expertise eliminated as well. And who's going to be reduced in force? The most recent graduates, right?
Yeah.
Not the long-term employees. They're not the likely ones to leave, unless cynically, the management of the company wants to remove the highest paid workers rather
Right.
than the lowest paid workers. But I think on balance, what's going to happen is that the people who manage to get a toehold into companies, small businesses, et cetera, are still at risk. Even over the next 5 years, their jobs are the ones most likely to be eliminated. And I think that's really a scary prospect.
Listen, AI is going to favor people who have been there 5, 10, 15 years, because they have that, until AI gets to such a point that it can completely eliminate, the in-depth knowledge and what I always called intuition in terms of a job. And by that, I just mean like, or a hunch, like Andy, you would have a hunch about something as being the COO. And we could, if we sat you down in a room at the time you're working at LifeAid, we might say, well, but why do you know that, Andy? And just if we had infinite time, we could sit in a room and just shoot the what for 6 hours. And we just broke that down, and we just kept asking you why and why and why. Chances are you would uncover stories, you would uncover past experiences where you'd seen something simple or something similar, and so on and so forth down the road. And there would be this tree that comes out of this, right? That's all summarized by you saying, well, I had a hunch that that's the way this was going to tip. I saw it and I had a hunch, right? And of course, it's not a hunch. It's not just this flippant thing that happened. So AI is going to favor people who still are capable of doing that. To your point, AI is going to be troubling for people who are just maybe getting a toehold or not at all, because you don't need their 5, 10, 15 years of industry expertise. They don't have it. And AI is going to be able to scoop that up pretty quickly. And then if you have AI that's also able to act on these, as we're talking about with agents, now you have a reason that the company doesn't necessarily need to have you, which what my guess is that it drives the salary up. Your starting salary goes from 45 to 65 or 75, but only half the people are eligible because they came out of college with whatever they came out of college.
Yeah, the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis did a study, and they said that 40% of the current set of recent college graduates are underemployed, meaning they're working in a job that doesn't require their college degree.
Yeah, I read the same thing.
Yes. So that's just further evidence that it's going to be very difficult for this generation that's graduating or has graduated recently, to find their way forward, unless, as Beth points out, they take advantage of AI, they upskill, because people with experience with AI are in demand, right? Companies, even if they don't have active AI deployments right now, they want to make sure that all of the people that they hire now have some experience with AI. So very important for them to get that experience.
So, yeah, we're doing two things here, right? We're highlighting the challenge, and we are acknowledging that we are seeing some opportunities, and those will not be opportunities for everybody. But in that context, Andy, it is easier and faster now to write a book than ever before, cheaper to publish, right? Like being someone who interviews for the job with a published book changes you, right? Like changes, I don't know that it changes you. You're probably just the same person. It changes the way that your resume and cover letter look, right? Someone who applies for a job with a portfolio that directly addresses what the job is for also changes how you look. Those are specific things that are much easier to do now than they were before. Now, I have had these conversations with Jyunmi, so I would love to hear, because there are lots of people who have the feelings about, in order to get to the next level of the interview, we would like you to do free work for us that we think will take you about 10 hours to do, right? And that's a little problematic. But it is also possible to do that and maybe do that really well in 2 hours. Still problematic, but still a problem. Jimmy.
Yeah, well, I think overall, what AI is going to do for the labor market, or just work in general, is it's going to force issues, right? We already know that there's plenty of issues on how the system works now, where there are gaps, and what businesses are running into trying to fill those gaps, and fill all the positions that they need. Um, and so I wanted to touch upon a couple of things that you all have said. Um, Number one, Andy, yes, the example of Japan is fantastic, because in East Asia, those mega companies essentially, were created after World War II, and they did everything, right? So they build everything from home appliances to high-end computer electronics, or engines, those kinds of things. And so they were the source in which rebuilding funds were funneled into, and everybody worked for them. And companies understood at that time the way that the system worked was, you would join, and they needed to have all the labor they could, and they wanted them to get better and better. And as new people came in, it would be training them up, because they're sort of a think of it like a river, right? You need input coming in so that you can better your output, because people grow and age, and finally retire out, and things like that. So you always need new labor. So, but in the last, I don't know, 40, 50 years, it's really been about how much, all about the profits, not necessarily what is the sustainable infrastructure. So these are where these gaps in labor has come from. And now with AI, it's forcing the issue of, maybe we need to readjust or reevaluate some of these systems. And speaking to what Brian was saying about the internships, this may be an opportunity for the rise of apprenticeships, even in white collar positions, right? Even in the knowledge worker space, because your you will want your foundation or your infrastructure of skilled labor to be uh, to be senior, to grow into that with all those experiences that you're talking about, you know and the only way to do that is to build into the system, to bring in the people and actively give them the experience, and actively give them the opportunities to grow within the organization. Right now, everyone expects to move jobs every 2 years, because you don't get a raise, right, unless you move to another company. The percentage of you getting a raise by staying with a company is minuscule. You'll more likely get a significant increase into your livelihood, your income, if you move from company to company. And that's the way it's currently set up. It's like, okay, I worked for them for like a year or two. All right, cool. If I want to get that 20% raise, then I got to go somewhere else, which causes problems for the company that you're leaving, because now they have to go through the process of hiring and things like that, and it costs more to hire someone new and go through that entire process than it is to just give the raise to the person who wanted the raise. So it's, all of these cyclical type of issues have got us to this point. And with AI, now it's forcing the issue. It's forcing the, hey, these are the choices that companies will most likely make. This is where we're going to cut off. This is where they're going to cut off, like customer service and maybe sales, and those kinds of things, all at the entry level, because on the uh, on the record sheet, that looks like the easiest, biggest cut they can make. That's how they'll save money, is by doing that. But we're not seeing long term, right? if if you're one of these big businesses, I'd say, hey, think about where your company's going to be in 40 years. Or maybe you're not thinking your company's going to be around in 40 years and it's just going to be gobbled up by a Google, or, we get more and more megacorps over here. But that's a side topic. So for me, I think with the advent of AI, certainly entry level jobs are in jeopardy if we don't take steps to either alleviate that or speed up the ability to adopt it and accept it within the entire ecosystem. And this is just an example of how society and technology, and there's a huge gap in society catching up with technology, right? Technology is not going to go away. It's there already. Genie's out of the bottle, all of those kinds of things. So what can we do to speed up society in that adoption or adaptation would probably be a better word, adaptation for bringing society more in line with adapting to the advances in technology.
Right. And I really love what you said. There has been a push for apprenticeships, a governmental push for apprenticeships for some time. I cannot speak for the new administration on whether that will continue, but there is like apprenticeship.gov exists as a site. You can like do stuff as an employer, as a career seeker, as an educator. There's lots of that kind of stuff. And I also want to say that I really like the intentionality approach to this, because this is something that has always existed if you know somebody. It wasn't called an apprenticeship. It was called, hey, we'd love to have you come work at the firm in the summer, right? And then you got to do a little bit of the paralegal stuff, and you got to sit on these things because you were somebody who knew somebody who got to do that. And that is likely to still continue in this, but it definitely is a barrier for the vast majority of people who don't know somebody, right?
Yeah,
And
this is
yeah,
well, no, I was going to say this is why, because that's the haves and the have-nots too, right, Beth? Like we know that sometimes the reason you know somebody is because of connections through parents or close relatives. And why do they have those connections? Well, we can back that train up and figure out why some people do have connections to those and some people don't. However, I will tell something that we don't have any seniors listening to this show, but I will say this: if you're 16 and you're thinking to yourself like, what could I do today that's in my control? Start a LinkedIn account, and then not just start it. Don't sit on it. Don't think of LinkedIn as some place for old people. That's the wrong approach. If you want to have an impact, if you want to start to control your own future, then you need to start growing your own network. And not mom and dad's network. You need to start growing your own network because number one, you're old enough to start communicating and start participating in the global conversation that's happening about business and things that you're interested in. And so something I've definitely told 16-year-olds, that's the age, by the way, that legal age that Microsoft will allow you. Honestly, I think it shouldn't be any younger than that. They said, well, what would I have to share? And I said, you have your own life experiences. You have your own ways. And what I've seen on LinkedIn more than anything else is there's not a lack of people our age willing and wanting to help the young generation. That there's not a lack of that. I see it every single day on LinkedIn. If any four of us see a true go-getter, however we define that for ourselves, right? A 16-year-old go-getter, what's the one thing most people, so not everybody's this way, most people are like, hey, good job with that. We don't always see a whole lot of people like reach out like that and share their story or whatever. Like, think about this. You might want to think about, hey, this is one thing to think about. You immediately, because I think it's just human nature, want to go, hey, great job. I see something in you. I could help you out with that. I could give you a leg up. I know somebody who knows something about that. I'd be more than happy. And that can happen on a social network. Yes, it's great when you're in a physical location and being there and hearing the stories in the hallways. Absolutely. But it is something anybody can start working on now. And of course, you didn't miss the boat if you're 16 and now you're 21 and you're listening to us and you're thinking like, well, I didn't do that. Yeah, but you know what? It's a great time to do it right now. because you can start building up that social network. You can start having conversations, especially if you're not where you want to be. You're not making, maybe you have that college degree, you don't know where you want to be. You start building that connective network now, so that it's going to pay off in 2 to 3 years or whatever the case may be, maybe faster depending on who you're talking to. And that's completely in people's control. So just want to throw that out there. I don't think it fixes everything we're talking about today for a long shot. But if we're really saying is entry-level jobs are decreasing, as we've had comments in the, I want to bring it up here. Kai just said said a bit ago in our comments, just got my master's in comp sci in Europe, and I can tell you the market for junior roles is absolutely dead right now. There's a direct report from the front lines of somebody who just quite literally finished, and not a master's degree in Europe on it. Of course, we don't know Kai's whole story, but case in point, if we see that coming, one way that you can combat against that is by actively going and growing your network. And you can do that online. You can also do that locally by getting involved in local organizations. You can do that by getting involved in non-for-profits, because guess who's running the non-for-profits? People like my dad, who's retired in 2005, and he was an executive at a high-ranking company, and he's standing in there running the forklift. You know who'd be a great resource for people? Standing next to my dad, running the forklift at 73, because he has a wealth of knowledge that people don't realize that he has, because he's running the forklift at a non-for-profit in a warehouse. So there's all these opportunities for people, is my point. And that's what it's going to take. What you're saying, Beth, about internship.gov, but also, or intern.gov, what was it?
Apprenticeship.gov.
Not even close. Apprenticeship.gov. Thank you, Beth. I realized as you were looking at me, I was like, I know I said that wrong. I could tell. But what I was going to say is that, like, yes, use resources like that if they're available to you, but then also just think outside the box too. There's like just other ways that people can get around the Andys of the world, the Beths and the Jyunmis of the world, and say, hey, if I just kind of buddy up next to something you're doing at Improv, Beth, you know, I probably will also absorb some other great things that you know about Salesforce, or maybe in conversation, standing on the side of the stage while I'm at Improv with Beth, I say something about, you know, I really think I might have a thing for sales. And Beth goes, well, I mean, I'm a Salesforce, you know, master here. Like I could probably point you in the right direction if that's something you're interested in. Let's have a conversation about it over coffee, you know? So anyway, I don't want to get on a horse about it, but I'm just saying that's how it happens.
I want to bring in some data that surfaced in my research on this subject. There's a company, a mid-level bank, investment bank kind of operation called Clarify Capital that serves small to medium businesses. And they did a survey on this specific subject. They did a survey of 1,011 employees and executives of small and medium businesses. And here's some of the statistical results from that, you know, fairly sizable sample of surveys. 64%, so it was 55% were employees and 45% of that were executives in the companies. So you got a mix of those things. But of the executives, 64% expect entry-level positions to evolve from creative efforts to review and refinement of AI outputs within 3 years. That changes the skill requirements that you know people are hiring for. And again, reinforcing that you need to spend some hours every day learning how to use AI and be able to say with confidence, I know how to use it. I know how to use it in whatever you want to assign me to do. Next thing, 1 in 12 of those executives have already stopped hiring for entry-level positions due to AI advancements. And that's a small percentage today, but it's going to increase. 78% of hiring managers predict AI will lead to layoffs for recent graduates. So this is a trend that we've talked about, a disturbing one, which is many companies are wanting to take advantage of AI for productivity improvements, which means, you know, output per employee. How do you get there? You automate a lot of things and you reduce the number of employees and maintain or increase your output. That's productivity enhancement. GNP per capita increases as a result of that. Next one, really disturbing, 57%. A majority of managers trust AI's work more than that of interns and recent graduates. So there are people studying this subject out there, and there's quite a bit of data out there, including a Capgemini study that looked at this question of entry-level positions and what's happening out there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I don't know, maybe that's a great place to like sort of wrap up today's conversation about it. I mean, really the whole point, if you say, is like any day that we're having a conversation, is to come sort of talk out loud about some of the things that, some of the great things that are coming with AI, and some of the serious problems that we're going to have to talk out loud a lot more about in conversations like this. And hopefully people listening to this, it triggers them to have conversations about it, or maybe look internally towards their industry that they're currently working in and saying, if you're looking at it and going, well, I can beat this with a new education, I can beat this by going back to school. Well, I mean, the reality is you may not be able to, and that's not true for everything, obviously, but you may want to focus on some of these other areas that we've, talked about on this show. Certainly we're not experts in this field either. Like Andy said, there's experts that are currently out there looking at this seriously and paying attention to it. But it's worth having conversations about, because I've always said I have a daughter about that age. And it's something that's obviously in our household a lot. And, as a father, I think to myself a lot, like, well, how can I best, set her up for a future that works for her? Yes, she needs to be able to use and understand AI 100%. Although I think, Andy, that's probably going to happen because they'll have used it so much through their studies that I think naturally there'll be a lot of hands-on training with AI. I'm not sure if it reaches all the areas, but I do think most students, my daughter included, will have that. And then also the network side of it. And, how do you continue to breach out in a world that's getting more closed off, more, hey, I can sit at this desk in this office in Tampa and I don't need to be in the room with Beth and so on and so forth, and we could talk every day, in a world that's moving more towards that. And perhaps remote work is here to stay. How do you take control of your own destiny, your own future? It could be through entrepreneurship, but to your point, Beth, that's not going to be for everybody. I know people that's not for. They're like, and I say, you would be amazing at that, and they go, no. Like, not me, please, no. I don't, like, that's not for me. It's just not them. So that's not going to be everybody either. So where do these next 3 to 5 to 7 year graduates adjust? Hopefully some of that comes out of this topic. So anyway, more rambling on that, but it's an interesting topic, and I know we'll come back to it again, especially as more advancements in education. Tomorrow is the news, and I already know there's one from Google that I'll definitely be talking about in the learning education space. So make sure you come back tomorrow and the rest of the week for all our other topics. Really appreciate everybody in the comments and sharing your stories about how you're seeing it in maybe your industry. And it's always appreciated because we bring those into the conversation. It helps us have a better one as we go. All right, that's it for us, guys. And we will see you again tomorrow. Until then, bye.